Today, I want to talk about all the traditional female-oriented skills that I looked down on but was required to learn from my mother, grandmother and mother-in-law, and how much later in life these same skills became my mainstay in the Western world and helped me achieve my goals and be the person I am today. Welcome to Navigate with Kalpana. When I was a young girl, my mother gave me a handicraft project during the holidays that was to be completed by the time school started. It could be embroidery, knitting, sewing, crochet, anything that involved the hand and eye coordination and produced something aesthetic and of some value. This was supported by a sewing class in school, where the long red nails of the teacher, who enjoyed pinching our ears, ensured I did my work, learning the finer details of hemming, piping, placket opening, creating buttonholes, and so on. I always resisted these assignments and considered them a waste of time. They did not suit my temperament at that time, which was to be restless, playful, and generally jumping about enthusiastically. One vacation, I was to knit a baby sweater. In an act of defiance, I completed the sweater in 3 days, handed it over to my mother, telling her to back off for the rest of the vacation from these compulsory feminine tasks. I asked her to acknowledge that I was fully capable and skilled, as the sweater was well and neatly done, cheekily adding that it was as good or even better than what she could have done. Later, I was challenged to learn some basic cooking and household chore management before I could toddle off to postgraduate studies. As a daughter-in-law, one was expected to turn out perfectly round hot chapatis for the family and take turns cooking when we visited. Through these experiences, I always complained that I had better things to do with my life. Looking back, I now realize that while I was turning up my nose at household tasks and chores, I was identifying with male role models who had these things done for them. I also assumed that what I could do, others could do as well, and so I completely marginalized these skills. I had dreams for myself, my role and place in the world, and they did not include being tied down to being just a housewife. But in order to get where I wanted, I needed to satisfy those who were willing to support me on my journey. And so I did what was required and became fairly skilled and even grudgingly enjoyed the process. Fast forward to my 50th birthday. I found myself attending a process-oriented psychology workshop in Yahats, a small village on the northwest coast of Oregon, USA. Very little in realistic terms supported my being there and signing up for a program that was expensive, time-consuming, and really difficult to get through. I was the only brown person in a room full of white folk. The culture I could even remotely identify with were other Japanese students who made me feel at home when they would collect in a group and nod their heads saying ho ho, as we did in Marathi. I was poor, dedicated and focused and really hungry to learn. This was apparent to all my teachers, who understood that my lack of funds was not going to stop me from learning. We worked out a way to gain scholarships to attend class and sessions. And this is where all the skills I had so reluctantly learned from my mother and grandmother came in useful. I began to cook and cater events in exchange for tuition. My mother-in-law's perfectionist attitude with regard to food preparation always irritated me, but it really came in handy when I had to cook for people who had never eaten Indian food before, other than an occasional restaurant curry which they considered very exotic. They had delicate digestive systems and glorified being vegetarian. For them, I learned to cook with ingredients I had never seen or used before, strange greens and roots. I learned to be both creative and intuitive. I educated myself on what type of food would work for whom, started reading up about Ayurvedic body types, and cooked day after day for nearly 5 years. All the skills I had were learned from women in my life who had fed and nurtured their families in their own homes so well all those years. My full lunch box ensured I was never hungry and had enough to share with anyone who sat next to me, and so I never lacked for friends. Moving away from silks to synthetic fleece clothing to keep warm was not easy, but with my sewing skills, I always managed to get the better of thrift store second-hand garments to fit right, and added a bit of this and that and made them my own. On dark winter evenings, when I needed to think through complex issues and concepts, keeping my hands busy with sewing, crochet and knitting were also soothing and calming. When I stepped away from home, family, community, culture and country, I entered a space no ancestor had ever been before. Then, it was the skills I had learnt at home for free from the women in my life that both enabled and facilitated my journey. Facing the mirror, it was time to acknowledge that all the skills and talents I took for granted and considered universal were not so common after all. The very same skills I had marginalized all my life as being of no use, traditional and housewifely, became my mainstay and helped me do the things I really wanted to and get me to the place where I really wanted to be, here where I am today. People might ask, why give up all worldly comforts? For what? We'll talk about that another time. Till then, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever had such similar experiences? Are you trying to say the same things to your children? Have you thought about what you learned and have just taken for granted? Now is a good time to acknowledge and give thanks. Are you passing on your skills to your children? Let me know.